Welcome to the Near Future podcast, where Jonny and I chat with design leaders at the edge of what's possible today with AI. Today we have Randy Hunt, veteran design leader of New York. Randy, you've spent time at Etsy, Artsy in New York. You also spent some time in Singapore working at Grab as VP of design there. And most recently, you've been at leading design at Notion. And you also balance this alongside work at at SVA, where you're currently the chair of the MFA in design. So many amazing things. Welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
So just to kick things off a little bit, and maybe this is a weird time to do this given the summer, and maybe that's not as true in New York, but definitely in Europe it is true. But curious about your day to day. You've got a lot of things going on, a lot of plates you're spinning. Could you tell us a little bit about what your day to day looks like?
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, it's it's interesting. It's I do have a lot of things going on. I would say I manage at a high level. I like manage what's going on with a support system. There's kind of like the human support system, and there's like the systems planning support system. I think my wife and partner in many things is a really helpful like sort of collaborator and planner around stuff. I think we do a lot to orient our lives to op- allow each to have the sort of optimal times we need when we kind of are doing the need to work the way that we need to work. That's extremely helpful, and also to kind of like come together and support each other. She's involved a lot in supporting the students at SVA in their thesis work,
Cool.
which is cool. So it's fun to get to work together on that. The other is, there's support staff in places like Notion and places like SVA that help things really run and move. And so I think having developed good habits and skills around delegation and how to kind of like operate with a team is certainly helpful. And then the other part was maybe gets closer at some of this topic of like working with AI, which is really just kind of scaled personal systems and also finding ways to um, use those systems to allow me to get or remain like close to work itself. That really kind of like in the weeds, not just be kind of, you know, delegating and orchestrating, but also be doing like the craft of whatever it is I'm working on.
Mm.
Um,
Do you have
and to be able to do that.
do you have any examples of that? Would love to hear what that looks like for you.
Yeah, I mean, there's interesting ones around kind of just operational things around communication and stuff like that. I've got email agents and task agents and things that, uh, in a way, kind of, yeah, they mirror some of my like behaviors and decision making in the past, but I've kind of documented them. And so the way that things get sort of triaged, categorized, prioritized, and kind of like acted upon, um, in a way follow a personal process I've probably been doing for like, I don't know, 20 years at this point or something like that. Um, and that's really helpful because the busy work of kind of managing all of that is dramatically reduced. That's just like time saved. Well, I still have a good degree of confidence that the things that I wish to treat as important are in front of me when I'm choosing to spend time doing whatever that sort of class or category of work is. Um, the other is in some parts of work, really like establishing um, what are effectively like custom agents to do more specialized workflows around things that would be more labor intensive. You think about kind of collecting resources for communications, whether that's in the kind of industry professional context. You might look at things like updates on progress that's been made, either for me to receive and understand or to like share. In the education context, actually looks a lot like um, kind of collecting events in a way. You might imagine like here's accomplishments of alumni, here's accomplishments of students, here's kind of things of faculty. You want to like compile these things together and communicate them back out. This is kind
Mm.
of the ecosystem of kind of credibility and accomplishments and like the long tail of the effect, the positive effect of an education program. It's important for us to kind of understand those as much as possible, organize them and share them back. So there's a set of like workflows there. This is kind of what I would used to be like manual knowledge work, and it's like mostly automated now. And I automate those things almost entirely with Notion. I mean, I do most of my like agent orchestration inside Notion and stuff, which is one, because that's something we built and then something I'm very close to. That's my preferred way to kind of
Mm.
work on things. But
Uh,
there are other ways to accomplish similar. Yeah.
Randy, I was going to ask, did you go full Notion? But in past roles, I cut my teeth at Deliveroo, and there was a leaderboard of who'd spent the most money internally on Deliveroo, which is Europe's answer to Uber Eats for
Yep.
other Americans. And I was really low down the chart. I barely used the service, proudly so. I don't know why. Just um, careful with money. I don't know. It's probably more a question for a therapist than anything else. But I'm just interested, like how are you running all of this operational load through Notion, and like as you've been building agents, have you been full dog food?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So I love dog fooding in general, and I think that it's such a powerful way to help understand and improve a piece of software and experience. And yeah, that was true in my time at Etsy. So we didn't have like a leaderboard, but there's moments where I'd go and do some research myself, just kind of understand. And for sure, I was pretty like top tier Etsy shopper. I mean, at one point we bought this old house from like the 1880s, and we were kind of like, did a gut renovation. I mean, every like lighting fixture in there, and everything was from Etsy.
Yeah.
Like all of the major kind of like pieces of furniture and lots of small decor pieces of stuff. So I use that as an excuse to kind of dog feed the product, and so it feels similarly. So yeah, the here's maybe the hard part about something like this. So I'm like full in on Notion, both in like my Notion life. I was full in. Also, I got the graduate design department at SVA kind of fully running in Notion as well. And that's like we're a paid customer there. Out of none of the development features, none of the tests, none of the next generation stuff. I use it very much like a regular paying customer
Yeah.
there. And I like having both those experiences to kind of appreciate that. But the other thing that's happening, we're working on sort of technology like this, you also want to understand the other methods. You want to like be a real user of like competitive products and all this stuff. We spend a lot of time using tools and trying stuff multiple ways to understand it. You're like, okay, it's pretty laborious. When I describe it that way, then you're like, all that other operational efficiency stuff I described is has got to happen. Otherwise, it'd be like impossible to spend time, duplicating an activity only using cowork
Right.
or something just to feel what that experience is like, and then go do it again in Notion because you want it to do it the way you would prefer to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We went through the
Yeah.
process recently of rebuying Notion. Tom and I, we had to sort of make a decision about 6 months ago. Like, okay, where do we put our stuff? We were sort of messy Google Docs, and I think we'd finally decided to like buy a whole new G Suite, organization for ourselves. Really splurging on that. But do you really want to use Google Docs for all of your collaboration? No, not really. So then, therefore, going back through the process again of being like, yeah, Notion is actually great at a load of stuff. And so it was nice actually, because I sort of feel like I was such an early user of Notion that I have it free forever, seemingly. I don't know, maybe they'll change it. But and loved it, and then was like, I don't know. And now sort of coming back, I think it's really, Notion is speaking to me quite a lot in that I sort of just want one thing, and I like that I can plug in agents and like extend it as I need, but also it can be really simple. So anyway, it's just yeah, it's not. It's actually really nice to have you on here because we're using Notion so heavily now again, and we've built our own CRM inside of Notion and stuff like that. But
Yeah,
yeah,
great. I mean, yeah, that's music to my ears. No, it's a real pleasure to hear that. I think that right. That kind of like say scalability. That feels so buzzwordy, but the flexibility of the software to kind of serve very simple needs, but also quite advanced needs in one place, and how you kind of flex between those, and is certainly one of its points of power. Also, as you were saying, you kind of connect your external agents, as we've done that. I think there's a we don't use this kind of like open source or even like walled garden kind of terminology much externally, but there's definitely a spirit of like Notion is it's like not a walled garden. You can get your content in and out. You can connect other things to it. It's kind of like AI knowledge work Switzerland is a little bit of the idea,
Mhm.
you know? And I think that pairs well with what has historically been a strong emphasis in the product, even pre-AI, to be sort of malleable and flexible to a user's needs, and sort of the possibilities of what you might want to do. Which has also, I mean, it's a great advantage and also has some challenges in user experience and onboarding, product communication. You know, it's kind of a natural tension there. But overall, this idea that you can be extremely flexible and do lots of different things, and then that you can bring things to it and bring things out of it, I think is actually a really durable, like competitive position, and also just makes for like sort of a nice product to use at this point. I mean,
Yeah.
to your point, you could be in the Google Suite and be like quite happy with the number of tools there. I mean, a lot of the stuff's very battle tested, right? I mean, Sheets is like, it's just
Totally.
battle tested at this point. Yeah. Uh, uh, and Gemini is making some great, advancements and points, and you have moments where you feel like that even the integration of the product is like pretty good.
Yeah.
It'll surely keep getting better. But then you're like, oh, but I kind of want to use like Claude for this thing or something like that. You're like, oh, if I want to live in like a multi-model world and not just be in like Gemini land, I kind of need another place to get my work done.
Right.
That's true for all the labs.
Right.
Unless you want to do everything with ChatGPT, you kind of need to have something that's also not in
And we were
in that ecosystem.
A few months ago, with a client, we were implementing Notion agents, and it was as it was launching, and the pricing was a bit unclear, and that I think you guys hadn't quite built some of the controls for the organization at large to control spend and stuff like that. So there's a bit of nervousness around it, and maybe I had assumed that it would be a walled garden and we wouldn't be able to plug in other stuff. So I was really just like pointing Claude at the MCP and, oh, wait, actually we can just build quite a lot of stuff outside Notion and use Notion workers for the stuff that it's best for, and have that balance.
Totally.
I think it's just such a reasonable attitude to take in this world. Like, ultimately you're going to push people out of Notion if you don't let them use what they want, so it's self-defeating. Totally. It's like short-term greedy rather than long-term greedy.
Yeah. It's like you should use it because you want to use it, not because you feel like trapped using it. Yeah.
Randy, I'm being greedy with all my questions, but I'm just going to ask. I'm going to go into sort of maybe out of Inside Baseball Notion specific, but I know that you have opinions around speed and craft, and Notion is well known as a product that displays incredible craft. I think that's sort of how Notion broke through in my mind anyway. It's like it just looked and felt better than anything else. And actually we're going to be sharing a stage in September at Hatch, and hopefully you're going to be talking about it. I'm going to watch your talk in September in Berlin. But ahead of that, if you can tease anything about your opinions there, I just like, how do you avoid you can have two of good, fast, and cheap, and achieve like speed while also maintaining a quality bar? Like, what have you learned, I suppose?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, maybe some of this comes from, in mindset or like in spirit. I really dislike any of these setups that say like you can't somehow have both. So it's like to put two things in some like binary with each other and assume that they're a trade-off. I do like I think balancing three things is already closer to reality, but there's probably also other factors. Like these are simplified models to help us kind of make sense of some things, but the problem is that they're such good like sense making mechanisms. This idea of like quality, speed, and cost or something, that they become they I think limit our thinking too. You like start from there and be like, actually, this whole endeavor is balancing these three things, and you're like, what if you don't?
What if that's not true? What if the first thing you said is not true? Yeah.
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 What we got right now. And so I feel the same about this kind of the speed quality tension. And here's so maybe that's the spirit is like, oh, I want to find a way where that's not true as one part of it. But the other is I think that what I've experienced over time is that one of the key factors between something being good quality and not good quality or being or like falling short of where we believe it could be
Mm.
is the ability to take inputs about what it what is kind of falling short and do things to close that gap, right? And there's others, which is like the belief that that is a good thing to do and
Right.
like the desirability to do it, but this particular part I think could best be summarized as really like a learning cycle or like a learning loop. Which, if I use a bunch of like industry jargony stuff over the last what 3 decades or something, it's all approaches like agile or like cycles or it's whatever. But it's basically like if I could do some little loop of like learning about a thing, like sort of realizing something, looking at it, have some insight, could be as minor as like these things should be aligned.
Mm.
I fix it and deploy a change. Could be zoomed out a bit more. This behavior should be this way. This language, like this concept and this flow, whatever it might be, is confusing for this reason. I mean, the most obvious ones are just when it's like broken.
Mm.
You're like, okay. And lots of tiny, small, broken or confusing things add up to making something feel pretty poor quality.
Mm.
It's like if I have the opportunity to do those things and then fix it, I'm closing that gap between the thing not being as good as it could be and being as good as we would like for it to be. And so then the extent to which you can recognize those things quickly
Mm.
and fix them quickly, the earlier the quality gets better, which
Yeah.
means that like for your users, let's assume you have like a flat or growing user base or usage of your product. The sooner you fix those things, the better the quality is experienced by users like in aggregate. Right? They have more time of experience it better, and likely you have more users experiencing it better because you have more people using it more often. And so it's not about like the screen being right or like that little product being right, like it was bad and now it's good. It's actually about the number of times an end user experiences the thing being bad or good. And like that, I find that justification far more compelling.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, there's like 10,000 people using it this week. There's going to be like 11,000 people using it next week, 12,000 people using it the week after that. The sooner I make it better, the aggregate effect of all of those quality improvements
Right.
adds up for every touch point from here forward. And so the speed of improvement is like has a positive correlation with the quality experience of the product. So it's not about like rushing to finish something. It's like I think like a bad old idea somehow. It's like the factory industrial model of making the thing or something. You're like, if I can just shove a project through the pipeline fast and be done, then like speed, yes, quality,
Right.
no.
Right.
But actually it's a bunch of tiny like micro decisions and learnings and fixes. And you're like, the faster I can learn those things and then make good quality decisions and have the results of the decisions make their way into customers' hands, the better quality the product is.
Mm-hmm.
And sooner is better. I can't imagine a world where you'd be like, you know what? That's a good set of quality improvements. Let's wait.
Right. Right.
Like,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that definitely makes a ton of sense in the abstract, but it raises some interesting questions in the tension there of historically in product development there has been maybe a designer using their cycles to craft the experience and then handing it off to an engineer who's then shipping to production. I think baked into what you're just describing there are either some handoffs or designers pushing all the way through to production or engineers starting with design. Do you have any
Yep.
thoughts on that? How that relationship changes in this world where we move quickly at high quality?
Yeah, yes. Well, one, and I think that's been true pre-AI, is like a non-AI answer. I think that the mental model of like handoffs I mean, certainly in software development, this is probably true in lots of kinds of projects where there is truly like a passing of the baton and no further no pre-interaction, no further interaction is just a terrible way to work.
Mm.
Awful. Like it rarely does it work well. It's like playing a telephone game, but with like far more variables. You know, like I feel bad for the end user or the customer at the other end of this thing because, like, you know, they're like the victim of poor like decision making, poor operations, bad leadership. You know, like
Yeah.
sucks on you. Give me your money. You know, like it's just awful. Like that's bad, bad, bad. Thankfully, I think I've been. I mean, even probably my earliest kind of like graphic designy print production days or something, or just like in environments where that was not so much the way. You know,
Mm.
you'd go and talk to your printer at the press about the work you were about to do. You know what I mean? They were like brought in early on. You know, they give you some guidance. They'd be like, if you make this decision, like watch costs on that one. You know, all these interesting
Yeah.
things would emerge. You'd be like, cool. They're like a partner for you along the way. You get some feedback on some stuff. You know, they're giving you technical. You know, if you cut and score it this way, it's going to cost you a bunch of money. But if you do it that way, it's going to do this. This way I can save time. I've already got these materials in the warehouse. There's all this interesting stuff, right? And then you're there at the end, like on the day it's on press. You're there, like with your own eyes, to like see it roll off and be like, "Is that right?" You know. I think that same mental model applies in software, like for sure. And so I think the ideal state, to your point, Dom, is that like, yeah, engineering's there from the beginning, and yes, design's there at the end. Yep. And I think the teams I've like built and led or been lucky enough to be a part of where that's been true has been where we've just achieved higher quality more consistently over time, for sure. And it's just more pleasant to do the work, honestly. It's like everything about this is better. Like
Yeah.
it's hard for me to think of a downside to this, except that maybe you can't then it's more human. And so you build systems around it and stuff. You can't treat stages of the process as interchangeable as easily if you start to think this way because it's more organic.
Mm.
Like collaboration matters. Meaning you can't be like, we just ramp up quickly. Just like here's some outsourced engineering. Like if you approach your whole thing as baton passing, then you can interchange some parts, which maybe at a high optimization level can work. But the mistakes is when you let like high optimization level, kind of like, I don't know, executive resourcing things impact the actual delivered product. Like part of the job, I think, it's any kind of leadership role is to make both of these things be true without having this one suck. You know, like you got to make this one great. The other is that, like, yes, here's maybe what's changing some. I mean, it's definitely changing. It's like, oh, the designer can do the engineering work more easily now. Um, Also, the engineer can maybe do the design work more easily now. Somebody else can do the design and engineering work. Like that's maybe the interesting thing to address. But I think that, like, I think about the Notion design team. I think about the Etsy design team. Like, we were shipping, like, designers were shipping production code changes pre AI tools. This is not a function of do I have a coding agent or not. There's a group of people who are software designers, and so they're like hired in that profile, managing that profile, expectation of that profile, the skill set in that profile, and so this profile of designer like loves building software. And I think if you love building software, I mean, other people also make software that don't have the same profile. And some of it's great. Like it turns out fine. So I don't think there's only one way. But our way is like, well, if I love this thing, I for sure am interested in the material it's made of. And so I understand how software is built and I try to get close to that and I enjoy being close to it. And that's not some trade-off between like the design and engineering. But that's just like how software is made. And you're like, of course, like this is all one. It's all one thing.
It makes me think of the book that you wrote back in the day, many years ago. I forget the exact title of the book now, but designing for the web, designing products for the web.
It's called product design for the web, which is a funny. Yeah, it's like a funny name, even that feels like it falls in and out of relevance. Like actually, right now, that name kind of maybe feels a little relevant again. But there's a moment where like for the web feels like a funny thing to say when like everything we're making is a native app. You know?
Yeah. I feel like that really has come back around. I feel like there's a big resurgence of web design as an area that does feel like it
Yeah.
bridges that product and web world very neatly. But hearing you talk
Yeah.
about this sounds very reminiscent of the ideas you've held for a long time. I'm curious, with AI specifically coming in now, or the sort of the current era of AI focus for teams, is there
Yeah.
anything specifically that you think is a risk? Like, there's obviously sort of advantages to efficiency and speed and being able to move more quickly and be more fluent in the languages of your teammates. But are there any downsides to that? Anything you've seen with the Notion team, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always some kind of pendulum swingy reactiony risk. I think we're seeing, actually you see a bunch of them in kind of, I'll describe maybe a concrete example or two, but see them in smaller operational ways or see in isolated ways, and then we correct them. I don't, maybe after this we can pause and back up and be like, oh, are there any like macro risks or something? But I think, well, here's an example of something I just showed. One of our designers, this had to have been 9 months ago at this point or something. So it's funny, like these, where these chapters are moving quickly. But this particular designer is actually working with an engineering team that I would say was working in a little more of like a linear fashion, a little more their muscle memory, the way they'd worked historically, was a little more transactional. Part of this has to do with like geographic separation between some of the collaborators, like with big time zone differences that sometimes almost necessitates a little more of like a handoff kind of behavior unless you have other operating models to help get around that. Um, Long story short, they were used to working in a way where a designer would kind of like deliver screens and then they'd be kind of wired up. And now, of course, there's a version of like, here's Figma file screens. There's a version of like, here's a bunch of like front end, um, we get closer to that. Here's a bunch of, front endy versions. But basically the designer was pretty unsatisfied with the quality of the final execution and also the time the team said it would take, like, oh, this will probably take us like 4 weeks. And the designers are like, that can't possibly be, you know? Um, and so he just worked all weekend. I mean, using kind of like, it was early days of us using like Claude code. He just like built it all out himself. I mean, all the micro interactions, like all the, like, he just spent a long weekend doing it. Not because anyone asked him to, he just like wanted to. He was like, I can't believe this would take that many weeks. There's no way. And it was awesome. You're like, oh man, this is incredible. Both the love and passion for making the thing, the quality of the deals. You're like, this is rich. And it was, look at the amount of time it took. Um, but basically, it's almost like a funny story. You could kind of maybe predict where this is going. Uh, it was like one giant PR. And the engineers were like, so this is now going to take us like 2 weeks to review, you know? And he's like, wait, what? Like, that can't possibly be. It's like an interesting, it's like running into each other. And you're like, oh, what are some of the principles of like designing complex software at scale with like hundreds or thousands of people like touching the code? And you're like, oh, there's like a best practice here of kind of breaking things down into small change sets and, the kind of way in which you might go through a code review. And so they're like, okay, we need to put some both cultural learnings in place, but maybe also some checks in place in the tooling to not have things like this happen. And you can imagine that lots of people could make that same. I think it becomes quite easy to be prolific with the making, but you still got to like review and merge. Like all these things around like security, performance, et cetera. Like there are real considerations. But I think the way to address these things today isn't to go like, oh, and then we need to like make sure the human can fix it. It's actually like to design scaled systems that most of the time are making the kinds of decisions a human would make so that you can like get these things, kind of reviewed, approved, merged in, and it can be, autonomous or quite nearly autonomous. Yeah.
It's interesting that learning that it turns out if you don't have to worry about the quality of your code, writing code is easy and cheap. It's when the code has to be good that's when it gets more expensive.
That's right. And then you have to use all your meta thinking skills again to be like, okay, what are the decisions I made? Then you get
completely.
write new tools and skills. You share those skills with your teammate. You know what I mean? So everybody understands how the system works.
Yeah,
You're just constantly in like systems design mode and
right.
this kind of like meta design thing,
Yeah.
to keep the machine evolving. Yeah, yeah.
I'm interested, Randy, if you've mentioned the building a system, presumably at Notion, but maybe elsewhere, that encourages speed and encourages these tight loops and this learning loop to happen. Practically speaking, what is involved in that? Is that skills? Is that ways of working or training, or what goes into building that system of humans and complex, unpredictable people that can move at speed predictably?
Yeah, yeah. There's a, I think there's a really, okay, it's a really organic part that looks pretty like chattery, like with humans, which you could imagine just like Slack channels and or like comments in Notion docs and things, right? I'll come back to like why that is. But I think there's always some kind of like emergent stuff bubbling up. It's like that's how you first find out that this person on the team wrote this skill, or like you're both talking about something like that should be a skill. This kind of stuff kind of like comes in moments like that. Then there's like a habit, I think is sort of like learned across the team. We don't really train about. I think you sort of like learn through osmosis and exposure of like maybe we should train about it more. I don't know, but where you how would I say you kind of make shared resources of common decisions for other people to make. The simplest version of this is like, oh, I've got some guidelines. I mean, that predates AI, or so like there's just some rules or some ways of working or some common, how we do stuff. But you start to take the how we do stuff to be like instructions for agents
Right.
for other systems, right? Now in Notion world, this is a Notion document.
Yeah.
Awesome, right?
Yeah.
Very like and you're like, oh, I've got some skills basically, and like we put them in Notion. Fun things to come to help make that like even easier and have kind
Yeah.
of the right kind of like structure and taxonomy around it. But basically for us, like everything's in a Notion doc. Same thing as saying like everything's in a Markdown file, except that in Notion it's like now that means it's kind of it's version controlled, it's collaborative, it's part of the same like permissions and access control of your system of record. So
Yeah.
that's convenient for working with teams. So you're like, okay, I'm doing something now. I need to like add it to the shared system, add to the shared system. I kind of make like people know about it or learn about it because there's this chattery stuff going on. And then also there's the results of the output of that cycling back around. So this is part of that kind of like quality learning moment thing too, is this like stream of continuous sharing of like what we and or agents are doing with us,
Yeah.
and the feedback we're giving to it. So like you might imagine that comments on a Notion document where we're like orchestrating across like several agents or even like a Slack thread. Uh, we tend to do all of this. This is like cultural part of it. As much as possible, like out in the open. These are like public channels, public docs. So I can see how you interact with an agent. So like when you mention Claude in a comment of a Notion document and ask it to maybe evaluate what's there and like spin up a process to start like executing the answer to that, I can see like how you did it,
Right.
And so I kind of learned just by it being there, part of the like public record. But of course, I can also ask and be like, oh, what are all the ways that like Brian, what are some of the commands Brian uses most on the other thing? Like, oh, cool learning,
Yeah.
You're like, oh, it's these three things. Maybe we should make a document of that so that everybody can see it, And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
you show up at kind of like design share next week and you're like, hey, everybody, I made this doc of like all the stuff like Brian writes.
Right.
So I think that's where you get this kind of like dance between like there's kind of like the human emergent part. There's the documentation part. And the documentation, I mean that in terms of like just straight normal like documentation, but also skills, tools, etc. And that thing being viewed as quite organic, meaning like we keep flowing into it. It can and should be like constantly improving and changing, both by our own like directed means and sometimes like by an agent that,
Right.
like we have a UX writing, kind of agent that kind of self heals. And then what like our writer would, kind of approve like not in the like approve it, but actually sort of like observe it, and if it's not good, revert it kind of
Right.
thing. So it's like a roll forward approach of being kind of like self-learning. And then there's just like an actual tooling part of that constellation. So there's meaning, well, the way we might make a custom agent to do some things, and then be like, hey, everybody, here's what the custom agent does.
Mm.
Or the way we've done some things to have, a production environment and a more like prototypey environment. This is like net new tooling we've made for ourselves. But a lot of the tooling is fairly like simple. And
Yeah.
not to downplay it. I mean, it adds up into a quite like sophisticated system, and you connect it to these behaviors and
Yeah.
things that we have. But none of these tools are like, that radical. And in fact, there's stuff we've made ourselves. You're like bumping up against something. I think lots of teams are doing this, but we don't talk about it enough. You're bumping up against something, and you're like, oh, I wish I could just like point at this thing in the browser, and you kind of make like a lo-fi version of what ends up being like pencil or
Yeah.
paper. I keep confusing those two products. But
Same.
you kind of get at this because it feels like intuitively a little thing that'd be nice to have in your toolkit, and then you
Yeah.
kind of make it yourself. And then I don't know if some other thing comes along, somebody has an open source tool, is some commercial product, you might use that one instead.
Yeah.
But yeah, that kind of tool making part feels very of this moment. And people always did that, but it's much easier to do that now. Like, here's a little specialized tool we need along the way.
I'm curious on the tool making front, how you foresee that trend evolving over the next year or two. Like, is that of this moment right now, or is that sort of a discipline that's here to stay? Like the makers of tools for internal use and internal team operations.
I think it will continue. Yeah, it's interesting. I think that, I mean, you think about something like the product promise of something like Notion overall, not just like design team, but you kind of zoom out. Part of the premise is actually that um, there are lots of kind of like bespoke needs an organization may have, and it's helpful to have this kind of malleable surface that lots of people can manipulate and kind of build tools in, some automated workplace, some custom agents, and different organizing methods for things that can help them get knowledge work done. That you can't kind of buy a point solution or get some off the shelf thing and accomplish that as easily or as cheaply or as well as when you can kind of do it yourself. Because lots of organizations have like a bunch of smart stuff. They might have a bunch of smart stuff happen here, and then some legacy system that is just is the way it is inside this organization, or some weird cultural thing where like actually the permissions from that to that, or they just are. And so I think this idea of like homegrown tools and the kind of like bespoke internal tools we'll see continue to grow actually. When I think about them from a design tool standpoint, well, maybe this is true of all tools too. At the same time, I think you'll see we're trying a bunch of stuff, and some things are just going to kind of like normalize a little bit, whatever. There's like shaders, and I'm like, I built my custom shader tool, or I use the shader tool in Figma, or I don't know. It'll probably normalize around some stuff. Maybe in the same way that like, for 20 years we were all using some of the same like open source packages. We like stand on the shoulders of things. And like at some point, not everybody needs to make their like homebrew web type kerning tool. There might just be a couple that we are all like, yep, that gets the job done.
Yep.
But at the moment, it's almost like maybe it's fun. Maybe it's a little bit of a flex. Maybe it's a little bit of like, I'm going to do an interview. I need to show people I'm like AI savvy. So like, look, I built this tool,
Yeah.
It was like a proliferation of like micro personal tool making. Yeah.
Yeah. Super interesting. I really want to switch gears and ask you about SVA, because we talked a lot about Notion so far and general ways of working, which are very interesting. But I feel like you sit in this very unique position in the world right now as the chair of the MFA Design program at SVA. And I'm curious if you could speak a little bit to this next generation of designers that's coming through, and how what designers they're thinking about, what they're worrying about, but also as the chair of that program, how are you intentionally constructing a curriculum or a program that allows designers to do well in this future that they're arriving into, which looks probably quite different from designers graduating from master's programs in the past?
Yeah. There's there's kind of a meta version of this, which is my view. The curriculum is almost like this kind of like, I don't know, barbell-y kind of like strategy or something. There's some fundamental kind of like foundational things. At a graduate level that we believe are important and kind of endure. And you want to get like real solid about this. This is like ethics and design practice. We talk about like intellectual property. It's because we're like a kind of very industry and business and almost like entrepreneurial oriented program. There's a bunch of things here that are kind of universally true. Also, some aspects of just kind of like brand and how psychology kind of connects to design and like creating desire and differentiation. And all this is kind of true. There's a bunch of the middle stuff we usually like don't teach, like tools and whatever. You watch YouTube, but it was fine. But there's this other end, which is like I think must be like malleable. And this is like, how do you kind of structure a curriculum as a set of containers for those things to be able to like evolve always? What's interesting is I think that AI literacy right now is one of these like new emergent things, but like I think very quickly it'll become one of these things where you're like visual literacy, AI literacy, media literacy, almost kind of like how, it's like how propaganda works, and or like maybe broadly speaking, like how you shape perception and like shape behavior with design, and how AI like both works and how it sort of integrates in your practice and actually learns. It'll probably end up down here like pretty quickly, but like right now it's kind of here. The way we've done this is threefold, I'd say. One is we've introduced a couple of, well, there's an important thing that's or special about the program. Other institutions may also do this, but it's like a very like defining characteristic here. All of our faculty are adjunct faculty who are all working professionals. And so they bring into the classroom their own professional practice and what's happening there often, right? And so naturally for some of our faculty, the questions about the relationship between like AI and design, it like flows in that way, right? So that's one. Two, we've like introduced a couple of new courses or a couple of new classes to specifically address some things. And then the other is we've encouraged faculty members to bring some AI experimentation into parts of some work that was done differently previously. And some of these are really like experiments along the fly, and we'll kind of like see how it goes. For example, it was like course around like creative direction, which is very much like in the photography studio, like live, not like mood board creative direction, although there's things like this, but it's like there's another person here who's a very accomplished, in this case, image maker. There's like serious pro photographers, and you're like, we've got the studio for a day. Like time is money. You need to like give them direction to get the outcomes you want. Mm. Like this is this is a skill that is not often, kind of taught in this way, right? In that same class, we had them do the same exercise. This is like just before Figma acquired like Weavy. We had the Weavy founders come in, do a workshop with the students, and then they basically did that same exercise, but trying to like basically direct the AI to achieve common outcomes, just kind of like see what would happen. This wasn't like A/B, like which is better. You could do that if you wanted, but it was more just like different modes of trying to achieve a similar outcome. So that's like an example of, well, we actually had these kind of like synthetic personas giving feedback on thesis topic ideas from really kind of interesting angles, being like, okay, you're an attorney, you're trying to help me like minimize risk in this idea. Like what are the things I should be reading, learning about, considering in this like direction if I want to take into account like future liability of the things that so things like that, which are like would be very difficult to do previously, or just wouldn't get the level of like depth. So it's like this cool thought partner like kind of challenge thing. And then of course there's some areas where we're like, oh, like let's sit down and leave the classroom with an iOS app after 3 hours. Like let's go, kind of like vibe coding-y stuff. So we're hitting it from a few angles, but it's evolving like in real time. Yeah.
How are you finding the students respond to AI generally? It's quite well publicised that some of the speeches given to graduates, especially in the States over the summer,
Yeah, it's funny.
look forward to your AI future didn't go down super well. So have you got a
Yeah, it's
sense that people are
interesting.
excited, or is it?
Here's what I've experienced so far. It's funny. I almost maybe it's my own punk rock spirit. I wish that there was like a student who would come in and be like, I refuse to use AI in any assignment. Got kind of like politicized about it or something. I think it's a good
Yeah,
environment for them to like work out their relationship to that and like try that. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Slightly lower risk environment to do that than say like going to your job tomorrow.
right,
Um, but I'm not seeing that actually. I'm seeing one of two things. I mean, one, we did kind of like a listening tour at the end of the previous semester with some students, and our main takeaway from that, which was interesting, was a little more like, "Yep, got to get hip to it." I think
right,
they're quite practical, which was interesting. I mean, it's the nature of this program; it's quite advanced, but it is also not like experimental or purely. It's not a conceptual program. We are like oriented towards professional practice and ultimately helping people be successful, either like in industry, getting jobs and things, or like sort of carving their own path, being entrepreneurial and sort of making so there's a practical orientation. And I think the students overall have that in common. And so, yeah, my takeaway for this listening tour is overall, even for the students who are like, I don't know, like it, but kind of got to like get hip to the tools because it seems like that's what's going to happen. So there's that. I think that's the most negative of the sentiment I've seen was a little bit of like, well, guess I need to. But I've also seen some students like just totally lit up. Largely, I'd say more from the. I suppose I put this all in the. Here's something I was not capable of or didn't realize I could be capable of until encountering the technology.
right.
Um, we have designers who are more like static image maker or like animation or traditional graphic design or something. Um, Being like, oh, I can basically prompt my way to like 3D models. I can prompt my way to like visual effects, or I can use a combination of my like visual inputs plus some prompting to like arrive at rich um, time-based media and stuff.
Mm.
That there's some students who are like, oh, I'm into this. You know what I mean? Now it's almost like a new canvas to like use the wrong way and get really like creative with. And others that are just like, I don't know, made this video. I didn't think it'd be possible. I could do it. Now I can. Like more simple edits, but just in like an amount of time and so like pretty
Mm.
awesome. And then the other is much more on the software front. We're like, oh, cool, you got the bug. One of our students like went back to India for the summer and then made like an ERP for his dad's like warehouse company. He was
Sick.
just like, I don't know, I can make apps now. Like, let's just do
Yeah,
it. It's awesome. So I think that you see that kind of like unlocking of like new possibilities.
yeah,
It didn't seem maybe just didn't even consider trying something like that, which is funny. The same student probably could have done that same thing in a more manual way,
yeah,
or but the environment or like the change of the conditions has unlocked the like possibility. Be like, let's go for it. Let's try this. Let's try that. So I
yeah.
see that as like a really healthy experiment.
Makes me think of the saying necessity is the mother of all invention. He goes back and there's a clear need, there's a burning problem,
Right.
family needs an ERP, builds it, comes back to the course and thinks, well, hold on, now I can do that. What else can I do here?
Exactly.
It's
100%. Yeah.
this common material that actually can go in any direction
Totally.
broadens your horizons.
Yeah. And then I think what's cool in an environment like this, I mean, this is true in a commercial environment, but you have people coming from so many different angles with different motivations and different intent coming out, but they still like learn from each other in those funny little
Yeah,
pockets. You observe someone do something like that and you kind of twist it and apply it to your little universe that you're making for yourself. Yeah.
So true. Conscious we're running out of time. We have a minute left. Randy, do you have time for two super quick fire questions?
Okay, let's do it.
Question. I'll just go with one. So when AGI takes over everything, what will you do with your free time?
Yeah, I'll probably make music with other people. Probably just like jam. A good organic jam feels real nice.
Love it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I'd love to dig into that, but this is a quick fire round, so we'll move on. What is your favorite product right now?
Ooh. This is a great question. Well, I have to think deeply. I mean, probably today I spend more time either in in Notion or in Claude Code. Um, what is my favorite app today? Hmm. Actually, I'll say my favorite app is the new Notion AI app. We built like a standalone agent kind of orchestration app. It's available now. Like you can go check it out. I use that constantly to kind of fire off parallel threads of work and using my personal life, using my professional life. It's serving me really well, and it's such a focused experience. It works for my brain well. It's like a nice compliment to the my whole universe is like in the other app, and this is
Right.
just like what I'm trying to do right now. Yeah, it's pretty great.
Love that.
I'll
You
have
should
to
check it out. Yeah.
I feel like I
It's
might
actually
have
called
seen
Notion
it, but
Agents.
I need to dig back into Notion's
It's got
AI
the little.
offering.
Can you see? Yeah. It's got the little guy. I mean, it's black on
Oh
black, very
yeah.
designer hat. But
Wicked.
yeah, just
Yeah.
look for the
Yeah.
little.
I can see it. I can see it.
Notion
Yeah.
place on the app. Yeah.
Love it. Randy, this has been great. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us. Let's wrap up here because we're at time, 1 minute over. But yeah, love chatting with you. Really interesting to hear about the systemic layers that you're viewing your work at Notion and SVA and your own practice. Would love a follow-up conversation sometime in the future talking about music because we just scratched the surface there right at the end. But when AGI is here, if our podcast still exists, we'll hit you up and learn more about your music then.
Yeah, let's do it. That sounds great.
Thanks so much.
All right, take care.